Welcome to Trends with Benefits, a podcast by Van Eck with a forward-looking perspective. We explore new ways of thinking about the markets, investing, work, and life. Here's your host, Ed Lopez.
How you doing? How's your week going?
I'm good. Week's been busy. I'm in a really busy spell. I've been working on a big project that's still in production, but it's going to roll out later this year, and I'm really excited about. I'm really proud of. That's hopefully going to be helping a lot of people. But I'm in crunch time right now between post Labor Day in the fitness industry and in the wellness coaching space. People are like, okay, summer's over. Let me get all my stuff together before the holidays. So I tend to put on a lot of new clients this time of year while also working on all these other big culminating things. And so I like to say I'd rather be busy than bored and broke.
Yeah.
So I'd rather be busy than bored and broke.
Can you give any hints in terms of what this big project is, or what does it involve? I mean, is it a new medium for you? Is it?
I can't because of an NDA.
Okay. All right. Something
Stay
big
tuned.
brewing.
Yeah, it is pretty big, and it's brewing, and it's going to be awesome. Like I say, I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I find your background really fascinating, and just specifically the point of finishing your master's degree during the COVID period. That combination of, you talked about yourself as being a personal trainer with a master's in psychology. That's a unique combination, though?
Yeah. And to add a little specificity, it's a master's in applied positive psychology. So traditional psychology is studying what's wrong, what's dysfunctional in the brain, right? So like Freud and Jung, they're looking for what's wrong and how do we fix it, essentially. And when you focus on everything that's wrong, okay, you fixed it, but you end up in this neutral place, right? You're not depressed, but you're not necessarily the kind of high functioning that you want to be. And so positive psychology is the study of all the things that are right with people. So what does it mean to build a flourishing life? What does it mean to have resilience in the face of struggle? What does it mean to feel positive emotion, and why do they matter? And also, how do we teach those skills to people in their lives and help them build flourishing? And that's the applied part. So there are very few fitness professionals who have pursued formal education in positive psychology, myself being one of them. And so I'm the personal training side of this science of well-being, and how do we stitch those two paradigms together to produce what I like to think of as embodied well-being, right? Everything you're ever going to do in your life, everything you're ever going to contribute, you're going to do in a physical body. And so what does it mean to create well-being, to create flourishing from that lens? What does it mean to take care of yourself so you can show up in the world and do good work? And that's kind of my deal.
Are you surprised that more people aren't tying those two themes together, or those two practices together? I mean, it seems like if you're working out, getting in shape, you're trying to make yourself appear better, and then maybe there's a lot of, I don't know, do you find that there's a lot of people that have negative attitudes about the way they look, and that affects their well-being as well?
Yeah, I feel that we're socially conditioned to think that way, right? And some of that's marketing, right? If I go out there and say, oh God, Ed, you look so tired. Do you want to hire me to talk about your sleep? Because if you were getting more sleep, you'd be way more productive. Do you feel more energized from that lens? No, nobody would, right? I think in terms of why now, why even pre-COVID, why now? The fitness industry primarily is people who are performance athletes, a lot of former athletes, a lot of natural movers, people who are naturally drawn to their physical embodiment. And so they tend to look more to performance psychology for inspiration and direction. But I think one of the failings of my industry, and one of the things that I hope we start to get more right, is that most people don't want to be fitness professionals, or they'd be fitness professionals. And so thinking the way that a fitness professional thinks about fitness is not necessarily what's going to serve the world. And on the flip side, on the positive psychology side, and I don't want to belittle that, I definitely have some fellow alumni from Penn who are, yogis and group fitness instructors, they're dance instructors, there are fitness professionals and movers but we're a drop in the positive psychology bucket. You tend to be a mind person if you're in psychology, even if you're researching the best of what it means to live a human life, you tend to be focused on the mind. And so the people who start to bridge the gap, and there's a couple of us starting to weave together these ideas around paradigms in what does movement change in the brain? Why does movement make us more sensitive to pleasure and positive experience? Why does it lessen depression and anxiety? Right? Those are the positive movement sides, but also why does exploring gratitude or breath training or mindfulness meditation change our experience of movement? And why does a well-being lens or a wellness focus on motivation tend to motivate people better than when we make them feel bad about their bodies, right? If you have any other reason to exercise other than how you look in your underwear, something aesthetic, something external, you'll be more consistent, you'll get better results, and you'll be happier with your results than if I remind you every day that you don't like your weight. And if every fitness professional knew that, how would we approach our industry differently? So that's one of my big bullhorns to the world is like, hey guys, the science says we could be doing this with such greater impact if we just change the way we talk about it.
That's really interesting. How did you come to that realization, and what motivated you to explore this path?
Well, as with many people in the fitness industry and in self-development in general, it was my own personal experience. So way back when I got into fitness, because I was diagnosed with a chronic illness, and learning how to take care of myself in a chronic illness body is what brought me into the fitness industry. 3 years ago, I was going through divorce, and one of my good friends said, hey, maybe you should take this free course on well-being and happiness. I think you could use it. And it was Laurie Santos's Science of Happiness free Coursera course out of Yale University. And it's both scientific literature learning and experiential learning. So yeah, you learn the science, but also each week there's a homework assignment of like sleep enough, go for walks, meditate. And even though I knew the physical sides, getting primed to do like a gratitude practice, which I was not a believer in like, oh, this gratitude thing that all the woo-woo people are talking about. I didn't get it. But then I did the homeworks and I felt it change me. I felt how focusing on what I'm good at made me feel very differently than if I focused on everything that was wrong. And the first book on her reading list from that course is Martin Seligman's Flourish. And in the book Flourish, Dr. Seligman talks about the Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program. When he does, he talks about how everyone who goes to MAP is called to be there. And I get chills now when I talk about it because it's the same chills that I got when I was reading it. The realization that I'm supposed to go do that, but also why would they ever accept me? I'm just a trainer because I didn't know then what I know now, which is it's not about what industry you're in or do they think that you're going to be, one of my classmates is a rising star at Microsoft and he's bringing well-being to Microsoft. And I'm not that person. So I thought that I had no chance. And really what it was is that I belonged there in my passion for the idea that all of us have a right to well-being and that I can be a carrier for that message, but also one that includes like scientific bodies of evidence and evidence-based practices that have been shown to help people live better lives.
Do you have examples of some of the exercises that you just talked about that helped you kind of realize and feel better?
Oh, yeah. Well, the quintessential positive psychology tool, like the first one you're ever going to find if you go do a positive psychology course, is the VIA character strengths assessment. And that's free. You could go to, if you Googled VIA character strengths, it's a free online assessment. It's evidence-based around these quintessential human ideals and values of what's right about people. So things like bravery, creativity, loving learning, appreciation of beauty. And so you take this, I think it's a 250 question assessment, and it dials in on these ubiquitous human values and characteristics that we see cross-culturally. Like what is right about you, Ed? Is your strengths love and curiosity? And then when things come up in your life that maybe it's a challenge to you or you're having a bad day, how can you lean into your own strengths for love and curiosity and bring that to like the challenge you're having at work? Instead of, oh, I'm going to really suck at this interview right now because I've been up since 5 and maybe I won't have the energy. I can approach it as, you know what? I am passionate about learning. I'm passionate about science and I'm good at communication. Those are my strengths. And that's how I'm going to show up. So the via character strengths assessment and the tools, and many of them are free online for how you can be using your own sense of your strengths and approaching it that instead of approaching it from like a deficit mindset. We know that loving kindness meditation, that if you take 5 minutes and focus on how you wish there was less suffering in the world and you hope that someone you love is having a good day, like literally just an exercise in thinking about that, and then turning that lens inward. You know what? I hope I have a good day. I hope I have things that go right for me today. Now that's going to change your literal cognition, how you process your reality. You're going to be more friendly. You're going to generally interpret things as less bad. You might even experience less pain having done a loving kindness meditation. We know that going for walks, 20 minutes of moderate intensity movement will increase your sensitivity to positive experience and positive emotion. So just getting to you for like huffing and puffing for 20 minutes changes your cognition. So those are just some examples of things that, and there are dozens and dozens of, psychology calls them interventions because of course it's psychology, but these exercises, these very simple practices that people can bring into their lives that change how they think about themselves, they change how they think about one another, they change how they think about the world. And even something like how we communicate. It's called active constructive responding. I want to teach this to every wellness and fitness professional on the planet. I want to teach this to every person. I think we should be teaching it in elementary school. It's essentially the idea that when somebody tells you something good, you respond in an active way where you're like interested and curious, or are you kind of like distracted by your phone and disengaged? So that's the active part. And then the constructive destructive part is, are you responding by like asking them the good parts? Like, hey, like what's awesome about your afternoon? Or when someone shares something with you that they're excited about, do you just focus on like the negative? So if you told me you're about to go on vacation, I'd be like, that's awesome. Where are you going? And you tell me you're going to fly to Mexico. Do I respond to being like, oh, it must be so nice to be somewhere warm. It's cold where I am. Or do I respond to like, aren't you afraid about like people on the airplane being crazy? That sounds awful. Like one of them is going to make you feel great and the other one's going to be horrible. So all of these practices I'm spinning off, these are all based in the body of evidence of positive psychology.
I have somebody in my life that does that. The first time I mentioned something interesting going on a trip, they're like, are you afraid about that? Or you be careful? I'm like, oh, and you just enjoy it. So for that person that I'm talking about, you would advocate, try to say something positive in response to good news or things like that.
Yeah, I want to teach them active, constructive responding, right? Are you contributing in a positive way?
Active, constructive responding.
Yeah, to somebody else's excitement. Am I building up your positive emotion? Or am I like punching a hole in your positivity bucket and draining that sucker? Which I want the former for you, not the latter.
Do you feel like that this train of thought or well-being and mindfulness is something that is on an uptrend? I mean, I know that's always been around in some form or fashion. I mean, there's apps now that you can have, or there's like, alerts on your phone. I actually turned off my alert that says meditate or breathe or something like that. It just annoyed me, but maybe I didn't know how to use it.
I think that we are largely at an inflection point. Inflection points are going to be some of the most interesting times for any of us to live, to be, to work. And they also are incredibly emotionally and socially difficult, right? It's the squeeze. But I want to believe, because I'm a person who wants to believe in the good in people, right? That inflection point, that social discomfort that many of us are feeling is going to nudge us to really consider what matters, what's important to you, what are the meaningful changes that could bring out the best in us. And that's why I want to believe that meaningful wellness and well-being are on the rise. At the same time, those inflection points are also incredible opportunities for those who are most opportunistic amongst us to make their money and to sell cheap and hollow things. So while there is a body of evidence that shows that like nudges work, like soft reminders that kind of shift people toward positive behaviors. Like if I leave fruit out on my counter, but I keep the junk food in the cabinet, I'm more likely to eat the fruit than I am the junk food because I'm going to see it. I'm going to be reminded of it. I'm going to eat it, right? But the hollow part is things like the way that you just described, being annoyed with your own technology. Like that's not meaningful, partly because like you said, I just don't know what to do with it, right? Like breathe, I'm arguing with my wife. Like, why would I breathe right now? So what I hope is that those things that are hollow and shallow, continue to nudge people the wrong way. And we can feel it, right? We can feel when someone's a huckster. And I hope that everything we've all been going through, myself included, we are gaining sensitivity to the hucksters and looking for what's real. Wellness, fitness, well-being begin to rise within our collective consciousness towards what's actually meaningfully helpful instead of just more hollow nonsense. How's that for an answer?
That was awesome. That was fantastic. And that was off the cuff. That was great. So you have a podcast, and I love the name of it, Better Than Fine. What does that mean to you, better than fine?
Well, I'm an elder millennial, and I am from a generation that often says, it's fine. And we kind of shrug off. And really I started the show right before the pandemic. I started in February of 2020. And so it wasn't necessarily titled with the lens of what it's largely became in the last year and a half. But what it meant to me at the time was underneath shrugging and saying that you're fine is very often, one, you're not actually fine, right? A lot of times you're like, I just don't want to explain like the nuance and complicated negativity in my life. And if you are fine, is fine actually the target? Do we want to just be like, I'm okay? And if we revisit this paradigm in positive psychology, it's like the absence of the bad is not the same as the presence of the good. So fine is just the absence of the bad. And I don't feel like fine is what any of us should be shooting for in the long run. And I grew up below the poverty line. I'm the first person in my family to get a 4-year degree. I know what it is like to hustle to make sure that you have what you need to function. And so there was a point in my life where, yeah, fine was what I was shooting for because I was, making it by $10 every month. But at the same time, that was never the goal. The goal was never to be fine. The goal was to get to the place where I was better than that. And so the podcast for me is about exploring all of these different ideas of if we let go of fine as good enough, what does it mean to have a threshold of good enough that is better than just getting by? And that's as individuals, as families, as humans with bodies, as cultures, what do we want for ourselves? And do we really just want to be like, I'm okay?
So I know you've come in and have spoken with the Van Eck employees, and you've also done presentations for financial advisor groups, things of that sort. And since our audience is a mix of individual investors and financial advisors, I just kind of wanted to get your take or your recollection of maybe some of your past presentations to financial advisor groups. What were they interested in? What are the issues that you noticed that they might be dealing with?
Yeah. So the past workshops I've done at Van Eck and at some other groups have been on wellness and well-being topics like self-care and sleep and strategies for working from home, and how do you set up your office and your day to be able to remain productive and still take good care of yourself. And I think as a group, what I experienced was a group of people who were really invested in, how do I take good care of myself? How do I optimize my time and my energy so that I can show up and serve myself, serve the world, serve my family, serve my clients? And that it really was about, how do I keep this, human organism that I'm responsible for myself functioning? How do I keep it humming so that I can keep showing up day after day? And I'd say foundationally, that's true of a lot of people that I work with, is that interest in combining self-care with service, right? I'm going to get enough sleep. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to get some movement in my day. I'm going to stretch my hip flexors because now I spend all my time sitting, so that I can continue to hit my goals for my clients, give them good advice, be able to be a good active listener, that all of those service elements start to fall apart when those foundational needs are not being met.
We wanted to talk about reframing your mindset. And when we talked about doing the show, we talked about all the things that are going on. I know a lot of people are anxious about return to work, for instance, and the ongoing pandemic. And then there's others, and like many of us, I guess, that have been on Zooms, 10, 11 hours a day.
Amen.
And yeah, probably burning out too, and kind of dealing with that. What do you think is important for people to understand about themselves as they think about the struggles that they're feeling?
I think one thing that's really helpful and useful regardless of who and where and what you are, because I am assuming that the listeners of your show are a pretty diverse group. The concept, Kristen Neff is the world's leading researcher on self-compassion. Self-compassion is the mindfulness to be able to monitor your own state and your own reaction, the recognition of one's common humanity, that we all suffer, we all struggle, we all go through things that are difficult, and we all deserve kindness and love and support in the face of those struggles. And that's not others, that's you too, right? Like you person who are struggling, just like everyone else, deserve the compassionate response to your struggle and suffering. And the third element of self-compassion is the ability to be kind to yourself in the face of suffering and struggle. So like, you're struggling and you're not going to necessarily heighten or beat yourself up for it. You're aware that all people struggle. And then what you can do is meet yourself like you would want to meet your friend in that place of their suffering and struggle. It sounds pretty woo-woo, but there's actually a fair body of evidence about the skills of self-compassion. And we're not culturally taught those skills. It's not a thing we really talk about. And I feel like right now, as resilience and burnout are like the hot work topics, and we're going back to the office, and how do we not burn out? Burnout is individual and cultural. My favorite metaphor I've ever heard, and I wish I could attribute it, but I got it third hand, so sorry, original person, is that when it comes to burnout, you are both the pickle and the juice. Like, you cannot blame a cucumber for becoming a pickle when you soak it in vinegar. So if we consider that we're in a burnout culture, you're both the pickle and the juice. And we are always contributing to the culture we are in as much as we are a product of our culture. And at a certain point, as a responsible, self-aware adult, you can choose, like, what kind of juice am I putting into this like world? If I'm part of Van Eck, if I'm part of a major financial organization, or I'm part of a little, family run in-home, like, little team, or if you're an individual just serving clients, like, what are you putting into their lives as much as they're giving back to you? Because burnout isn't just about yourself. It's also about who you're influencing and how you're approaching those exchanges and then skills like active constructive responding, right? How I respond to someone's disclosure, someone's information, someone's sharing. Well, now, when I build them up instead of break them down, I'm helping their day. They're in a better place. Now the juice is not quite so bitter. So what are we doing together? I think that those are some of the most important skills. It's like the skills of the self, but also the skills of culture. This is the moment where soft skills become paramount in a way that, we talked about them before the pandemic, but they've never mattered more.
When you talk about soft skills, you're talking about empathy and working with other people, interacting with other people.
Yeah, my favorite career coach guru that I follow is Ellie Hearn of Penciler Inc., and she calls them human skills. We both hate the phrase soft skills. But human skills, like, how well do you human? Do you handle people well? Do you know how to talk to somebody who's having a bad day? Can you make somebody laugh? Can you have a crucial conversation? Are you a good teammate? Those human skills are what help us all make it through the day without totally frying out as individuals and interpersonally.
If you love what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, just in your job, do you think you can burn out?
Absolutely. Let's say you love what you do, but you're in an office where the 2 or 3 other people that you rely on are all going through like a major family struggle. It's that we're in that moment. And suddenly, in order to keep the ship afloat, and you've taken that on as your responsibility because you're the one that's going to do it, but now you're working 15, 18 hours a day just to get everything across the line, 6 days a week. And on the 7th day, you're still writing your emails. Like, how long are you going to still love that? Another great example is, we know when we look at human motivation, that the more we try to externally incentivize someone, the less and less they identify with their decisions. So if I take someone who really loves their work and I just make them focus on their bonus structure, I will eventually completely demotivate that person. They will no longer be doing it because they love it. They'll be doing it for the money. And eventually they will be disincentivized because it's just not worth not having a life anymore. People who love their work and are deeply passionate can eventually be disincentivized to the point that they no longer want to do the thing that they used to love. And what we find is that person then really struggles with their identity because, like, I used to love this, who am I now if I'm not the person that loves this thing, but I do love it, but I hate it right now? What does that mean? Like that's a really complex and emotional place to be. I've been there myself, and I do not wish to go back.
No, I totally believe what you're saying. I mean, I think from even just kind of thinking from like a manager standpoint, understanding the motivations of the employees, your staff that you oversee, I think ownership, for instance, is such well, for some people, I guess. Some people want to come in, just do a job, tell me what to do, and I want to go home at 5 o'clock. There's other people that are super motivated, want the ownership, want some responsibility, and might find motivation in that and passion in that. And you take that away, then it's just, from there, maybe it's burnout or whatever.
In there, what I hear from you is that both of those examples, they're still internally motivated. And there's nothing wrong with the person. And this is my personal opinion. The person who wants to come in and do the job and work 9 to 5 and then go home and coach their kids' little league team, I want that guy on my team, because that's a person who's going to stably show up and just keep ticking. And that's the social arrangement of employment, right? Like that's the agreement that we made. You're going to do 9 to 5 so that you can go coach little league. Like that matters to you. And I want you to have a life outside of work, because you're going to be a most stable, more interesting, more kind, more connected person. And if I'm a good manager, I'm going to understand your motivation. The young woman who wants to take over responsibility and she is after it, she wants a management position, she wants to develop. Well, if you're in your early 20s and you're shotgunning, that's awesome. And I'm going to reward that with more interesting projects, more work, more effort, more whatever. But that person's also in a very different moment in life. And I think if we're responsible leaders, we're the people who are looking at our whole team, appreciating the positions they play. And I'm not going to put my center at point guard because they can't dribble, to mix my metaphors.
So what part of your practice now is personal training, wellness coaching, nutrition? Are you doing more wellness than personal training, or is it all together?
Yeah, I don't really differentiate them specifically. It is pretty much all together. I do have clients that I just coach. I do have clients that I just train, but the majority of my clients fall somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. What I try to do is bring that holistic, whole self approach to whomever I'm working with around their goals. The real distinction is that personal training is directly prescriptive around movement. So a client comes to me, they say, I want these specific outcomes, and I teach them the movement and design a program to get them those specific outcomes safely for whatever body they're in. That's in contrast to the paradigm of coaching, which is an externally directed but internal process where I'm asking leading questions, I'm helping people explore themselves and their choices so that they can be making better and better choices. And I'm also providing information and materials. So I've got a client who is mostly a coaching client, and they're, let's say they're wandering down a decision-making path that seems a little bit off from a trainer perspective. I'll let them know, like, hey, can I kind of just tell you what I think right now? And then I give them the science, and then I let them make a choice because they're the expert on their own lives. Whereas I just know a lot about people and bodies.
What does a wellness session look like? Is it a discussion like we're having and just a kind of a Q&A on your part? And does it happen once a week, or is it monthly? What should one expect?
Well, it's a coaching session. With it, like any other coaching session, they tend to be conversations. I meet with my clients at a minimum of weekly most of the time. I do have some clients who've been kind of grandfathered where they're really taking good care of themselves, and maybe we meet once a month because they're in a place where we're kind of sunsetting the coaching relationship. But the active clients, the people I'm really working with actively on their wellness, we're meeting at least once a week. And it typically starts with like, let's go over your homework. And then it gets into, how are you doing? What's come up since the last time we spoke? Let's unpack that together. Let's look at the things that have come up and the decisions you've made. And then what I'm doing is providing that mirror, that external reflection to let them examine themselves and the choices they've made, how that aligns with their values. And along the way, I might give them specific exercises or worksheets or, homework. Hey, go journal on this idea. Let's say they can't answer the question, how do you want to feel? Well, that's your homework for the next week. Go journal on that every day to help them really suss out what's going to work for me in my life And then what we're looking for is gradual progressive change, because we know that rapid aggressive change is not sustainable. Anybody who doubts whether or not they can change overnight, just remember what that felt like in March 2020. Like nobody liked that. I mean, maybe some people really liked the break, but the sustaining of that rapid change was uncomfortable for most people. So what we want is progressive step-by-step change. So what that client and I will look for is like, what's the next best step for you to take to build these ideas around the wellness that you want to have in your life? And how can I support you in the places that you need a little bridge? And where do you already know, hey, I know I can get myself to bed by 10 o'clock every night. I'm on it, coach. And they go do that. And then we pick through the next time, like, okay, how'd your homework go? What's coming up next? What do we look to next? And we just work on that and massage their lifestyle to get them where they want to be.
You know, given our listeners and maybe they're thinking about doing some wellness coaching or what have you, but for those that kind of want to get started, what's one thing that you'd suggest that they do tonight or tomorrow? Just what's one way of getting started?
If they don't already have a mindfulness practice, all meaningful change starts with understanding yourself better. So some kind of, whether it's meditation, it's doing a mindfulness practice course, it's just something that makes you more aware of yourself. If that's not in place, I would start there. If you hate meditation, you got other options. Like it's okay. The next one I'd say is sleep. If your sleep sucks, everything else is going to suck. You're going to have less self-regulation, less self-awareness. You're going to snap at people more. Your communication is going to be poor. Get your sleep dialed in. The best book I've come across is The Science of Sleep. So that would be my book recommendation for that. If you don't have a movement practice that feels good, and the reason I harp on that is we know in the scientific evidence that movement you're doing because it feels good, you're going to be more consistent, you're going to sustain it longer, you're going to be more curious, you're going to be happier, you're going to have more community. So find movement that you actually like. And if you don't know where to start and you're not sure what to do, the book you want to read is Kelly McGonigal's Joy of Movement. And then I'd say cleaning up your nutrition. And I put that later on because I have found in my decade in the fitness industry that a lot of people are really confused about what good nutrition looks like. We are a society with some very disordered eating, and it can come with a lot of baggage for people. And it can be really hard to sustain change in something that you've got a lot of quagmires around. But if you're sleeping better and you're getting regular movement and you have more mindfulness, you have better self-regulation, you generally feel better about yourself, then it's going to be easier to work on the hard stuff. So start where you are, start with the things you know you can change, and then gradually work up to like, what are your big mountains? Like if you're not going for walks, you're not going to go climb the Matterhorn. Like start with going for walks.
So as you know, this show is called Trends with Benefits. And one of the things that we like to do is like point out different trends. And I'd like to ask my guests about trends that they might see playing out in their own lives, whether maybe it's wellness, maybe it's something totally different, but this is your opportunity. What is one long-term trend you see playing out over the next year or several years?
I think that we are, and this is also like the hopeful optimist in me, I do think that we are going to see a trend in the fitness and wellness and well-being space that moves away from just constantly talking about weight and moving toward other reasons to take good care of ourselves. And I think we're going to see it anchored in people's values and what they find meaning in purpose. I think there's already an element of like biohacking for productivity, but I think even that we're going to see start to strip away and go toward like, hey, take care of yourself for you. And that in itself can be the reason that it doesn't have to be like, let me shame you into going to the gym. And I think that element is probably always going to be there in the fitness industry, but I think we're going to see what meaningful change looks like, because I think people are getting really tired of these like really outdated and negative paradigms. I want to believe those things. So I want to believe that that's a trend. Maybe I'm naive, but I'm out there pulling for it.
Cool. So we have a speed round called Trend or Fad. And I will surprise you with a few different concepts and get your quick take. Trend or fad?
Dun, dun, dun.
Mushrooms, trend or fad?
The magical kinds or the regular kinds?
Oh, whatever comes to mind.
Fad.
Connected home fitness, trend or fad?
If we are talking about those big mass culty apps and gear, fad. If we are talking about trainers working virtually to work with their clients wherever they are in the world, trend.
Intermittent fasting, trend or fad?
Fad.
Really?
Longer than 12-hour window. So when we're talking about like 18 hours, 36 hours, fad, because the science shows that eventually we hit a threshold of detriment, especially for women.
How about environmentally conscious brands, consumer brands?
I mean, I want it to be a trend. I also want it to be a meaningful trend.
And then bone broth, trend or fad?
Ooh, I want it to be a trend because I love it. I think bone broth is very good for us. You know, the standard American SAD diet is really deficient in gelatin compounds, which allow us to maintain and sustain hydration. And so these are things like why you'd soak your chia seeds or, like different just gelatinous, gooey foods. And so one of those foods is things like organ meats and bone marrow and that richness that you get in bone broth. Some of that is the gelatin from having boiled the bones. And it's actually very good for you. It's collagen rich. Like I say, it helps maintain hydration. You get a lot of electrolytes and trace minerals. Like bone broth is very good. And I also think it's delicious. And when I lived in New York City, I had a very significant Broto budget.
Do you do like chicken bone broth or beef bone broth? Do you care?
I like there's like the blend one that's like chicken and beef and I think maybe turkey. I get the blended one and I add like sea salt and turmeric and, a bunch of deliciousness to that sucker and heat it up. And now that it's fall, like it's bone broth season. So
perfect.
Yeah, I'm about it. I'm in upstate New York. And so it's plenty chilly. It was like 42 this morning when I got up. So it's bone broth. I'm about it. Trend. I say trend because I want it to be a trend.
Awesome. I'm newly on that trend.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Do you put turmeric in it? It's anti-inflammatory.
I've done it once before with turmeric. Sometimes I buy the pre-mixed stuff or the pre-flavored stuff.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's probably not as good as like just getting bone broth and then making it yourself. But
read the labels. That's some of the best advice I could give anyone about nutrition. You're reading the label and you can't pronounce the 16 syllable chemical compound, don't put it in your body.
Stay away.
Yeah. That's not, if it was made in a plant instead of growing on a plant, don't put it in your body. Make it a fad.
Well, cool. Darlene, this was awesome. I enjoyed the conversation and I really appreciate your time. What's the best way for people to find you, connect with you, follow you?
Well, I'm gonna plug the podcast one more time. You can listen to Better Than Fine. Like I said, my next episode is one of my favorite research scientists talking about like why we can fall in love with movement and how to make that happen in your life. So follow Better Than Fine. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at darlene.coach. My website is darlene.coach. I like to keep it easy to find me. And you can email info@darlene.coach if you have any questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Darlene.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Trends with Benefits.